You are in the inner chamber of the Kremlin as if you have always been there, an unwilling witness lodged inside the timber ribs of a nation. The room smells of tallow and boiled leather, of damp furs folded on benches, and the faint metallic slick of old iron. Tapestries muffled the footfalls, but not the small, human noises, the way breath can snag when a father looks on a son and remembers both creation and ruin. He stands like an altar of shadow. Ivan IV's face is a map of violence. Pockmarks like old wounds, eyes the yellowed glass of winter ponds, a beard that has been brushed by wars and betrayals until it will not soften. In his hand he holds a staff, not a scepter of gilded pretense, but a weighted instrument born of habit and command, the kind that has beaten men into obedience and men into silence. You know how power learns the shape of its blows. Your vantage is close enough to see the tremor in the Tsar's knuckles, close enough to hear the low whir of his breathing, which is, for a man who has given the order to unmake provinces and to have entire houses removed from the rolls, unexpectedly ragged. Before you, his son, the heir, the mourning child of a dynasty, stands small in a robe that has never been truly fitted for the tragedy to come. His face is flushed with an argument he cannot finish. There is an ugly, human impatience in his eyes that would, in any other house, have been the end of a quarrel, not the end of a life. The court presses its weight into stillness. Boyars lean like statues, every beard a question. The women behind the lattice fold their hands until nails bite into palms. Even the oprichniki, who have been taught to cultivate terror as a daily bread, look away as if they can avert the contagion. The rules of order, you think, have teeth that bite inward. Words fall between father and son like cinders. You cannot make them out, only the cadence. Accusation, a grief half said, something like entitlement turned to iron. The Tsar's face flushes. You feel the temperature spike as a winter room takes a spark. His staff comes down, not as a ceremonial punctuation, but as an emergency made of bone and history. The sound is not a slap but a punctuation, a dry, obscene bell. You hear close as prayer, the crack that is both immediate and endless. Blood is a quick, hot bell in the air. It smells of copper and salt and the small animal terror of living things surprised by their own end. There is the sound of flesh and something harder, an internal bell cracked at its axis. The air staggers, a human thing unraveling, eyes finding the face that struck him and seeking, perhaps for a second, forgiveness that cannot be given by those who have. Made a throne out of fear. You think of all the rituals that made this possible, the state as a stern mother, the oprichnina that carved obedience from law, the bureaucratic whisper of lists and names. Institutional horror has fingers, you realize, the fingers wrapped around the staff, the fingers that taught later generations how to pretend grief. Ivan, the maker of terror, now becomes the unmaker of his own blood. The room holds its breath like a body holding back a sob. Outside, Moscow goes on, unaware of the exactness of one household's fracture, and yet the unmaking moves outward like a spreading die. Before we trace the final breath of a broken dynasty, if you feel the weight of forgotten sorrow pressing through time, please hit like and subscribe, and tell me where you're listening from. Your presence here matters, even as we wander among ruins. You are in the half-light of the Tarim, where candles gutter like small crucifixions and the air tastes of tallow and iron. Icons stare from their frames with the calm, enraged faces of saints as if they too cannot look away. Frost rims the lattice, your breath fogs and hangs between you and the Tsar. He is taller than you remember from the tapestries, swollen with winter meat and cruelty. His hands are still shaking. You are the one who found the broken thing first, not the history books, not the seals and ledgers. You kneel now at the child's head because custom teaches you the proper humiliations. Hands beneath skull, fingers to the temple with a priestly steadiness. The hair slips through your grip, wet and dark, and your fingers come away sticky. There is a soft, obscene sound when you lift his face. The crown is not on it. The crown is in the room, a circlet of gold and pearls and nails, waiting like an accusation. You are aware of the room in every animal way. The brittle whisper of silk at the doorway, where the boyars stand like statues that remember how to breathe. The faint metallic clink of the Tsar's ring as he wipes his fist on his sleeve. The dull thud in your chest that answers the body's ancient alarm. Each beat of candlelight shows a new little crime. The skull is a bowl beneath your hands, a bowl cracked at its rim, a bowl that does not belong to the world of bowls any longer. Blood has cooled into something like congealed varnish. It reflects the icons back at you with a mockery of holiness. You are listening to the patriarch chant, as if ink and incense can rewrite the blow. His voice is linen thin, threading through the chamber with the habitual cadences of a man who has consecrated murder in his prayers without thinking of the word murder. The liturgy spirals, each verse a plaster placed over a spreading rot. Outside, the bells of the Kremlin toll for a saint. Or for a bell, you cannot tell. Inside, someone lays out linen sheets with religious precision, palm steady and mechanical, like surgeons rehearsing a ritual they have practiced on the living 1,000 times. You are thinking no, you are replaying the movement. The unease that sharpened into a thing with teeth. A jest misheard, a jest returned, the child's hand, so small, thrust through a cracked patience. You are thinking of the ledger of small violences that built the Tsar into a god who could bruise without consequence. The oprichniki who rode and ripped and left horses in the mouths of villages, the sealed decrees, the lists of names crossed out with a bureaucratic flourish. His violence has the bureaucracy's neatness. It is administered, authorized, ritualized. You are crying though you do not mean to. You are ashamed. A bureaucrat of grief, you have policies to obey. You are aware of the crown again, and the verse hardens in your throat. They intend, already, to set that circlet somewhere, to pretend continuity. You see them aiming to place the jeweled ring upon a skull whose fissure will hold it like a grotesque diadem. The thought is not sacrilege, but inevitable. You are the one who will hold the child while they do it, because hands that have been trained to serve the state are also trained to erase what they have seen. You are thinking of how, beneath the icon's gilded eyes, the institution has made a crown out of broken flesh, and you can feel its weight settle on your fingers as if it were your sin. You are folded into the velvet shadow of the Tsar's hall, a witness pressed against a pillar that remembers 100 winters. Candlelight runs like pale blood across icons, gilded faces catching the light with the indifferent calm of saints. The air is thick with beeswax and incense and the animal musk of the oprichniki. Black cloaks, dog-headed banners, the bristles of their brooms whispering of swept-away traitors. You can feel the stone under your boots, slick with the damp of many feet and now with a darker slick that will not be cleaned. He stands taller than you expected, the Tsar, a mountain split with grief and fury. His beard is flecked with gray, his eyes glint like iron filings caught in a furnace. His scepter is more than a symbol tonight. It is a ritual instrument, heavy and honest as a confession. Around him the boyars circle, their faces masks of powdered dread. The Metropolitan has his prayer book open, lips moving through a litany that seems to go on to try to stitch the air together, to sow silence over what is coming. You watch the boy, your Tsarevich, move into the chord between father and throne. He is clumsy with love. He steps close to the Tsar as a sapling leans to a storming oak, hands raised as if to catch the strike that only the father can land. You remember his laugh once, airy as a bell. Tonight it clusters in your throat with iron. Words spill first, ragged as torn cloth. The Tsar's voice is cataclysmic. Accusation folded into prayer, reprimand into the language of purges. The boy answers and your heart inverts, expecting the lesser wound, the rebuke that will pass into the ledger of palace memory. Instead, the scepter unfastens from the ritual air and becomes a hammer. You see the arc, a terrible, slow, obedient arc, and you think of church bells and heads lowered in worship. There is no slow to it, only the terrible inevitable. When it lands, the sound is a knell, wood against bone, a hollow porridge of a wordless sound that sweeps the room clean of ceremony. The boy's head gives as fruit gives to frost. Blood answers with a hot, immediate bloom, a red Sabbath opening in the center of the hall. It splashes the nearest icon. Phosphorescent saintliness is stained. The golden face of a martyr takes on human color. You taste metal in your mouth, a second star forming behind your eyes. The Metropolitan's prayers choke and become a thin, trembling thing. The Oprichniki close ranks around the Tsar as if to form a new liturgy. Protection and terror braided together. You move, though you neither decide nor will it. Your legs are pistons of obedience. Knees find the cold floor beside the fallen boy. You press a hand against the ruin of a head, feeling the warmth leave as if a house had been opened and the hearth gone out. The room fractures into ostentatious rituals. Columns of men rearrange themselves to contain the scandal. The clerk porters already calculate rooms for death. A chamberlain lays a cloak over the child with a calm that startles you more than the violence ever did. Institutional machinery whirs like a beast. Recorders scrawl, candles are relit. The Metropolitan seeks to bless what cannot be blessed. The Tsar's face folds, not into contrition, but into a terrible domestic grief that smells like vinegar and raw meat. You know, with the slow clarity of impending ice, that history will be taught hereafter with euphemisms. Fits, misfortune, the frailty of men. But you are here. Your witness is a ledger no ceremony can erase. Outside, the Oprichniki's dogs begin to bay, a ritual chorus answering the stain on the floor. You understand, with a hollowing certainty, what a red Sabbath is. A day when state and altar merge and blood becomes both sacrament and statute. You are present, and presence is itself a culpability that will warm you like a fever for the rest of your life. You are led through corridors that remember screams. The stone drinks the heat from your skin and gives back a chill that crawls like a confession. Tallow gutters in metal sconces, throwing the faces of saints into a milky, conspiratorial half-light. Your shoes disturb centuries of dust and the ghost odor of incense that will not wash out. Sandalwood resin, the persistent iron breath of something broken. You are not a child, and yet your hands tremble like ones when they first take a knife. In front of you the throne sits, if it can be called sitting, an avalanche of lacquered wood, satin, and bronze edges, as if someone had smashed a reliquary and tried to rejoint it with oath-stiffened sinew. Splinters stand where finials should be, little teeth that would bite a crown-bearer if you dared to lean upon them. A priest kneels and gently runs his thumb along a jagged lacquer, making the sign of a church that can bless a thing only by naming it ruined. You are the one who must inherit this. You are given the circlet, not whole but threaded, an array of salvaged circlets joined by a thready rope so thin it seems only a whisper keeps the whole thing together. It is warm from someone else's fever. You put it to your brow and feel the wink of metal where real metal would have been a promise. Your breath tastes of smoke and the iron hint of spilled blood. You taste it with a ledger's dryness and with a sun's shame. Around you, men in sable fur murmur like a court of flies. The boyars' faces are flayed by candlelight, alliances stitched across their cheeks, pensions hidden in their gloves. The Oprichnina stand like a private thunder, black horses pawing, their riders' spurs marked with the shape of teeth. Institutional horror is not the scream but the signature. A seal pressed, a new ukase scrawled in a hand that will not sign its own name, the patriarch intoning that God wills what the state demands. Paper upon paper, they bind the world as if law could mortar over a fracture. You are rehearsing an answer to a question no one asks aloud. Will memory be property? They want the deed of your father's violence to be registered, filed, made tidy. You hear the clerk, thin, hungry, speak aloud the litany of inheritances. Lands, serfs, icons, debts. After each item he reads, a hand in the room moves, marking a ledger, receiving a nod. Your name is spoken like a bell that will ring and cease, as if the sound itself might break into shards and fall. You are remembering the blow as if it were a ritual. You are the echo now, a son's whimper, the crack of authority. The cathedral's bell tolls slow and ecclesiastical, hammering the hours into a rhythm of requirement. The patriarch places his palm over yours on the circlet and prays for mercy and for order. His voice is full-bodied and vacant at once, the church making sanctity out of succession. You are expected to accept this inheritance. A throne rebuilt with other men's hands, a crown laced from fragments and fear. You are told to feel gratitude, to be grateful that the splinters were gathered at all. You are told to look forward, to smooth the fringe of crisis into a garment you will wear without itching. Inside you, another voice counts the true cost: the child's broken skull, the father's empty godmoth eyes, the invisible ledger of guilt that will outspend every estate. You are crowned in shadow. The circlet's teeth press into your skin like a constant, private reproach. You are promised legitimacy even as the building groans, the past made statute, the past made property. Outside, the hush of the Kremlin night closes in. Inside, the apparatus of rule clicks on, relentless and indifferent. You are the next in line, and the throne beneath you is only ever the sum of fractures waiting to divide again. You are on your knees before the iconostasis, sleeves damp with candle wax, a thin smear of soot under your nails. The church smells of beeswax and frankincense, of cold stone warmed only by the press of bodies, and the hushed reverence that is supposed to keep death at bay. Tonight reverence is a brittle thing, snap-crackling beneath the weight of iron boots outside and the velvet crush of a sovereign's cloak within. He comes in with a sound like a winter window being slammed. Ivan, his name tastes like metal in the mouth of prayer, ripples through the nave, his presence a law that bends the breath of every man and woman to it. Around him move the black-clad oprichniki, their brooms and dog heads bobbing against the torchlight, a grotesque litany of state violence dressed as fidelity. You watch his hand. It holds something small and ordinary, a staff, a scepter, a thing meant to settle disputes of ceremony, as if the grotesque detail of the instrument matters less than the intent in the palm that brandishes it. A quarrel. Such things are supposed to be kept outside holy walls. But the prince, your prince, the boy with a face like the thawed snow of spring, does not understand that the Kremlin is an education in terror. Words, sharp and personal, skitter across the carved wooden pews. The Tsar's voice becomes thunder, the people steep in the shadow of his mood. You can feel the syllables land on the thin bone of evening like hail. Then the blow. It is not the brazen, cinematic crack you imagine. It is a slow, private sound, the sickening, intimate wetness when flesh yields. For a breath you think you have misheard. Perhaps a log slipped, or the candle's wick bent and popped. Then the boy's head tilts, and something darker unfurls along the pale of his temple. Blood does not ring out like a bell here. It settles, quiet as ink spilled into a chalice. You watch it pool, a modest, obscene offering at the feet of saints whose gilded eyes do not blink. You do not move. Your body knows the rituals it is taught. Make the sign, close the lips, keep the prayer at the ready even when all else deserts you. The priests keep their voices, but the words are threadbare. Their Latin and Church Slavonic slipping into each other like two old men murmuring in a language they no longer understand. They carry on because the institution cannot bear the admission that the altar itself has become a theater for private ruin. Up close, the smell of copper is a living thing. You taste it at the back of your throat. You touch with the pads of your fingers, compelled, and the blood is cool, softer than you expect, as if the body is a bell whose ringing has been muffled under cloth. Around you the congregation presses in. You read the faces. Some stunned, some calculating, some already reshaping the narrative in their heads so that this atrocity will be excused by loyalty. You think of the oprichnina, those years of sanctioned terror, as a long prayer turning inward until the nation itself became a penitent. You think of icons, gilded and serene, made to witness sorrow and transubstantiation and everything of the human that wished to be holy. Tonight the haloed faces hold the stain of a quiet violence, and the altar drinks it without complaint. The state and the church, limbed together, have consecrated the hush. You will remember the soundlessness most of all. Not the crash, but the way the room closed around that small, private wound and turned it into law. You will remember how the blood, slowed and patient, made the stone look younger, as if it were being baptized into a silence that would outlast all of you. You are in the small private chapel off the Tsar's chamber when the world narrows to the scent of iron and beeswax. The boy lies half-turned on the lime-washed floor, his hair matted with a dark, slow river. Stone breathes cold against your cheek as you kneel, and the candlelight throws the icons into a gold carnival of false faces. Somewhere beyond the curtained doorway the oprichniki shuffle, their black cloaks like spilled night, the broom and dog heads a joke that has hardened into a liturgy. He stands above the boy like winter upon a field. You see the set of his jaw, the net of veins, the way his hands remember knots and orders. When he speaks, it sounds not like a voice but like sand poured over bone, a granular rasp that keeps the syllables from becoming pity. It is as if the Tsar has learned speech anew by grinding up the world until only grit remains. The words are commands and confessions braided into one, and whatever warmth might have been in them falls into the skull's empty room. You remember the coronation cushion, velvet crushed by crowns, the same cushion that held his knees when the Metropolitan laid the cross. Now that weight is the authority he uses to press down upon you all. Priests, boyars, servants, the child who will not speak again. A priest crosses himself, then crosses himself again, each motion precise to make the sacraments into a seal rather than solace. The mitre glints like a white beetle shell, the incense folds around the rafters and will not reach the boy's throat. When you bend closer, the salt of blood stings. You can taste something metallic on your tongue. Sand and bone, the mouth of the Tsar grates like a mortar. His consonants fall like grit, landing in the pooling red where anatomy and history meet. He gives names as if throwing stones: traitor, insolent, unfilial. Each name is a verdict, each verdict a pebble in the long sluice that makes the country's bed. The language of rulership is a slow erosion here, the same slow geology that flattens memory into policy. You are thinking, and your thinking is treason and duty intertwined. You think of the list in the registrar's hand, the black strokes of land and lives recorded like inventory. You think of monasteries whose bells once rang salvation, now tolling for reports and ledgers. The palace takes intimate grief and catalogues it. The church folds a murder into a rite by the careful placement of a hand, the stamping of a seal. Institutional hunger works quietly. It turns a son's sob into a state narrative, a beating into precedent. Across the room, a young oprichnik shifts, and the dog head at his belt seems to sniff the air for scent of sin. A priest whispers absolution with papery lips, counting rosary beads like beads of bone. The Tsar's face, up close, is a map of winters. His pupils burn with a light that doesn't need permission. When he leans over the boy and speaks something softer, or perhaps it is only the wind, the sound is still sand and bone, grain rubbing grain, as if he has swallowed a chapel and now speaks from inside its rubble. You are an instrument tuned to obedience. The institutional gears keep grinding, polishing the act into doctrine, and you can feel the grit under your nails. The boy's skull, the Tsar's voice, the choir's mute assent, they bind you. You realize, as the candle gutters and the icons watch without blinking, that the nation is learning its grammar in the creak of a door and the crunch of teeth. You are kneeling on cold stone that remembers every knee that has ever begged for mercy in this city of frost. The cathedral roof is a black shell above you, crackling with gilded saints whose painted eyes have watched princes and plagues, coronations and carnage. In the thin pool of lamplight, the boy's body is a pale island. His hair is matted, his collar torn, the soft slope of his face broken like some small plaster cast dropped from a craftsman's hand. Where his skull should be whole, a ragged seam gapes, brown and glistening, the sick bright of bone visible as if someone has lifted a lid from a coffin during a feast. You can taste iron on your tongue. You breathe and your breath fogs like a child's in winter. Incense curls and smothers the scent into something ecclesiastical, a saccharine fog that attempts to flatter out the rawness beneath. A priest with a lip gone purple from cold intones the prayers. His voice is a rasping wheel that turns and turns. Around him, other clerics murmur rubrics they have recited 1,000 times, as if repetition can stitch flesh undone, as if the correct sequence of psalms might force the past back into place. The icons look on, Christ with a wound in his side, the Theotokos weeping vermilion tears. You imagine how the opulent robes of the Tsar must glare at them from outside. Sable ermine, the heavy jeweled cross that has come to sit on a throne no saint could sanctify. The boyars edge along the nave in a choreography of vested interest, their faces pale under their fur, eyes like wax figures knocked from a shop window. You know, with the cold honesty that makes blood congeal, that these prayers are not only for a soul but for a succession, for the slow salve of legitimacy. An elder bishop lays his hand on the boy's brow. The skin is cool and spongy where the sealant ointment glistens. Beeswax from candles beads and falls like softened tears onto velvet. You hold the cloth presented to you, a corner slick and wet. Your thumb leaves a print in the congealed dark. You are tasked with holding the cross before the cracked skull as the psalm is intoned, and when your hand trembles the metal clinks like a tiny accusation. In the chant the syllables lengthen unnaturally, requiem, as if the words themselves are binding sutures, as if language could press bone back into union. Outside, beyond the heavy doors, the Tsar's men, black-cloaked riders of the Oprichnina, stamp and shift, their horses sweating steam into the courtyard air. You hear a muffled command, the click of boots on cobbles, the instantaneous animal certainty that power still moves by brutality. Inside, a canon is whispered for atonement, while another hand slips a folded paper into the bishop's sleeve. You see motion, secular and sacred merged, an administration placing its ledger next to a chalice. Your inner voice is a small, sharp thing. It whispers that the church is learning to stitch polity to penitence, to braid absolution with decree. It whispers that these prayers are themselves instruments, polished and tuned, meant now not only to save but to cover. The cantor's voice swells and the frame of the cathedral takes it in like an organ swallowing wind. The sound gathers and presses against the cracked skull until you feel the beat of it in your ribs, a pressure trying to close a wound that has been violently opened. When the final amen sifts out like dust, the bishop moves to close the eyes, and his fingers smell of incense and of the trade of absolution. You feel the cross in your palm grow suddenly heavy, as if the nation's weight has been hollowed and placed there. You watch the priests lower a veil, and for a moment the whole room holds its breath, mourning and calculation braided so tightly you cannot tell which strand will unravel first. You are the man with the quill, the one who keeps breath and law between parchment, a palimpsest of service in the Tsar's private chamber. The Kremlin's stone hugs you like teeth. The candle smoke smells of char and old prayers. You have been here for years, copying edicts, folding the state's cruelties into neat columns of ink. Tonight the ledger sits heavy as a coffin on the table, too many names already lodged in its vellum ribs. They call it the ledger of titles, but you have come to know it as the ledger of appetite, flesh and thrones, counted in strokes. You are watching Ivan. He moves like a weathered wolf in ermine, his breath hot and sudden in the cold air, his fingers stained with old decisions. His face is a map of coronations and curses. His hand carries a scepter that is more habit than artifact. When he speaks, it is not voice but verdict. When he silences himself, the court waits as if for a death knell. Tonight there is a sound you have learned to dread. The small, human sound of his son's anger, son of his blood, rising like a candle flame at a draught. You are closer than you wish. The Tsarevich stands near the hearth, flushed, wearing the provincial humility of a man who has never quite been a father's equal. He reaches to dissolve a quarrel with words that smell of love and ember. You hear the scrape of leather where lover and father collide. The argument is childish and terrible. Joyless laughter, a slammed word, your stomach tightens as if anticipating a sickness you must record. You are there when the scepter falls. It is a sound like old wood giving up its secrets, a dry chord across a winter sky. You feel the vibration through your bones and, reflexive and traitorous, you taste copper. Blood is a slow copper that fills the mouth as a new verb. It lands on the ledger, a warm, living punctuation that darkens the ivory page where you had been poised to write law. The ink and blood pool, mingle, stain the neat script you have been taught to keep holy. The scribe's hand, your hand, trembles. The quill dips into the wound as if into a well. You are a man of record. Your mind rehearses the formulas. Died suddenly, misadventure, divine will. But your pen betrays its owner. Each line you make remembers the sound of skull, the small collapse, the sudden, total silence that turns the chamber into a monastery of witnesses. Around you the oprichniki shift their boots, breathing the rhythm of order. The priests in their black stare down toward candles, as if choosing which god will do the accounting. The state presses itself like an animal around. A single bone, eager to feed and to annotate. You are writing and not writing. You inscribe a sentence that substitutes pretext for truth, and your throat narrows against the honesty it cannot afford. The wax seal is readied, double-headed eagle, stamped to seal a deed that will erase a son as deftly as a phrase erases a blot. Your inner voice is a ledger too, tallying small betrayals. The morning you learned to lie by omission, the evenings you kept quiet while orders were carried out. You count them like coins and feel the weight of each one. You are aware, suddenly, that the ledger on the desk has become a skin. It drinks what the throne spills and keeps it, preserving the state's appetite in loops of ink and blood. Every line you draw is a promise to forget in public and to remember alone. You close the ledger. Your seal cracks the wax. The sound is final and ceremonial, and you wonder, as the candle gutters against the Kremlin's merciless cold, which of you will be recorded next. You are the brittle hand that holds the goose-feather quill while the whole of the Kremlin seems to lean in, listening. The candles gutter as if they, too, fear to breathe. Beyond the high mullioned window, the Moscow cold presses its white lips to the glass. Inside, the air is thick with smoke, tallow, and the iron tang that will not be washed from the floorboards tonight. He sits across from you, enormous, folded in layers of furs and contradictions, the czar whose name hangs like a condensing fog in every corridor. His face is a map of winters. His hand, the hand you watch, trembles. You have seen him strike decrees with the same fist that now taps the table in small, unbearable rhythms. On the table, wrapped in the priest's stained cloth, the skull he struck lies like an accusation crowned in powdered hair. You want to slide away, but the look he gives you is not an order. It is a command from deeper than sovereignty, from guilt, from something raw and animal. Right, he says. The word is small. It is the last thing he wants to do, and the only thing he can think to do. You dip the quill. The inkwell is new and terrible, not the black that officiates court and charter, but a red that catches the candlelight and argues with it. He offers no explanation. His mouth moves as if tasting old prayers and new curses together. The priest mutters at his shoulder, ritual like a cloth draped over a wound. You write his words. They are jagged, each clause a fracture. He signs not only with his name, but with the tremor of a man who knows he has broken the hinge of his own house. He dictates to you the making and unmaking of futures, estates to be sealed, offices to be stripped, the names of men who shall inherit nothing but the long memory of terror. Sometimes he pauses, and in that silence, you hear the old bell of the cathedral somewhere beyond the walls insist on tolling, slow, indifferent. The oprichnina stand in the shadow by the doorway, their dogs' boots breathing, their faces lit like icons by the candle glow. They are the state's teeth, and tonight they are a gallery of patient things waiting to be used. Do you think, he says without looking at you, and you can feel he is speaking to himself as much as to the page, that a crown forgives, that a crown can hold a child's head and not split? His voice is not loud. It is the sound of a man measuring his own ruin. You cannot tell whether he seeks absolution or to condemn himself with ink that will not run from wood nor from memory. You feel institutional horror like a draft through the room. The church's rituals, the state's paperwork, the oprichnina's readiness, all mechanisms that will take this private breaking and make it public law. Every signature he orders is a lever that will grind into other lives. Every line you press into the parchment is a bone being set wrong in the nation's skeleton. He dips the quill one last time. The red in the inkwell seems suddenly too small to hold the weight of what you are writing. He lays his palm upon the paper as if to steady an ocean. For a moment, his eyes find yours, and you see in them not the sovereign but a father who cannot undo the strike. In that look is a testament more terrible than any clause you ink, that a man who is a state can still, with one furious human blow, reduce the brightest future to a red smear on his own hands. You write. Outside, the bells peal. Inside, the room leans closer to listen to how a kingdom signs its wound. You are the man who shuts the iron shutters on the window that watched the Kremlin courtyard when it happened. The man who knew the shape of the blow before the law did, who kept the Tsar's private silence like a talisman wrapped in oilskin. The sacristy smells of beeswax and old smoke. Beeswax softens, smoke preserves, and you have been polishing both sins and icons for 20 years. Outside, the bell keeps time with the march of boots. Inside, your breath fogs the glass and you can still hear the ghost of bone giving way. You stand at the low table where the brimstone ledger waits, its leather skin cracked, its iron clasps warm from your palm. You press your thumb into the wax and feel the heat of the seal, a black mark the size of a coin that will make the deed immutable. This is not a book of piety. It is a ledger of necessity, a registry. That converts impulse into edict. Names, times, the coded ink that reads like prayer to those who feed on power. You keep that ledger because someone must transmute outrage into order. Ink is a surgeon's stitch that closes the wound of a sovereign's temper. You remember the night the Tsar struck. The way thunder had rolled off the Kremlin walls, as if the heavens were attempting to throw themselves between father and son, and how the chambers smelled not only of beeswax, but of a sulfur so thin and certain it tasted like prophecy. The oprichniki had been there, black capes like river-burned cloth, heads held high with small brass dogs' heads that clacked when they moved, brooms slung over shoulders like obscene liturgical symbols. You had seen the dog heads sniff the air, sweep the court for traitors, sweep away the boyars. You had seen the Tsar's hand rise and the son's face crumple like old parchment. You set the quill into the ink and the nib trembles as if remembering the first time it was used to sign a sentence. Your hand knows the motion. Date, brief description, cause, accidental concussion, a phrase chosen to look like care, to sound like pity. You think of the pregnant wife, her hands on the husband's chest, the sudden clatter of faith turned to glass. Your mind whispers the justifications you learned in the antechambers. Disorder breeds itself, power must be cleansed, the state is a hearth and the hearth must not be polluted. You repeat them as if catechism, and the syllables keep your pulse steady. You are the man who seals the truth with brimstone. You break a twig of sulfur, and the room fills with its dry, acrid breath, a smell older than banners and colder than winter. You drop flakes into the warm wax. The seal snaps with a sound like a small church bell being struck by a dying hand. The smoke curls up, and you watch it wreath the icon of Christ whose painted eyes stare down with infinite, unkind indifference. You frame the ledger to the shelf. You replace the oilskin. You smooth the cloth over the keys and the keys over the door. The institutional machinery makes this small ritual lawful, makes the violent intimate and administrable. It also teaches you a terrible intimacy with your own small betrayals. You tell yourself you keep the legacy to preserve order, to save the realm from worse chaos. You tell yourself that ink, wax, and brimstone are different from hands. But as you blow the candle out and the chapel falls into a heartless dark, you know in the dry ash sand of the sacristy, in the taste of smoke on your tongue, that the legacy is not a thing you hold. It is a slow-burning dark you feed. You are the keeper, you keep it warm.